How's things? How are
Things are
you?
good. Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, it's nice kind of settling back into LA and yeah, I don't know. Life's good. And I'm excited about kind of some cool stuff in the pipeline for the show. And it's funny that when we hung out, I had no idea. It was literally right before. It was 2 days before the whole Grusch documentary came together, and it's wild. And you guys were kind of part of it. Maybe we should save this for the show, but I want to like give you credit because are we live now? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. No,
I
we're
just
not live, but
I just hit the
you
we're
guys
recording.
were a big part of it because I didn't release anything for 9 months between the Graham Hancock and him, and I didn't even know how I was going to come back or if I was going to come back. And you guys were like, it was so cool to just meet up and talk about UFOs, and I hadn't done that in a while. I hadn't done that ever really. And I was in this kind of internal conflict of like, I don't really like the internet. I don't like self-promotion. Like, I don't like a lot of the aspects of being online. But meeting up with you guys, I was like, I like doing that. Like, I like meeting like-minded people who are like interested in the sort of obscure topics that I can't talk with any of my close friends and family about. And I'm like, I could just do more of that if I had a bigger lighthouse. And so like, it's like, why not sort of keep going? And it was you guys and Amar on that trip. Amar was really like, he's like, Dave, like, what do you do? Like, why don't you do something with him? I was like, oh, yeah, you're probably right. So, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and actually,
Yeah, we
Thank
met.
you.
of course, man.
You're welcome.
Of course.
It was our pleasure.
Yeah, and
Yeah, it was super
it was
fun.
great.
Yeah,
And
Short
he showed me
notice.
all around
Yeah.
Copenhagen. It was in the Niels Bohr Institute, and it was awesome. Yeah.
it was amazing, man. It was such a pleasure to hang out with you guys for 3 days. It was a big pleasure, and almost all.
And good to
Also, like a
Likewise.
huge honor because I've been watching your show and things like that. So just having like the opportunity to hang out like that was just so fun.
It was a
So-
blast, and to hear all your guys' deep research.
and good to see Amar as
What's
well.
that?
Yeah, and good to see Amar as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was really
Yeah,
fun.
yeah.
And you guys were
Yeah.
amazing hosts and super generous with your time. And so cool to see people, halfway across the world do their own super deep research. And, I know, Frederick, you've been into this stuff for, probably half my lifetime or something. And so that's humbling, and yeah, I'm honored to have
Yeah.
met you and to be on the show.
Goes both
Oh,
ways.
thank you.
Yeah, we really had many good conversations around different kind of topics, and we also talked a lot about David Grusch.
Yeah.
But every time, like the conversation turned into talking about David Grusch, you seemed some kind of secretive in some way. Were you already in the process of planning the documentary, or what was going on?
No, what I just told you is the truth, which is, I had thought about doing something with it. I had thought about, maybe do I even break the story? Like way earlier when the debrief broke it, I was thinking maybe there's something I could do there. But so it was always in the back of my head. But I really, when I spoke to you guys, I didn't even know if I was going to come back to the show or when I was going to come back to the show or who I was going to come back to the show with. And it really was a combo of you guys and Amar over a longer period of time had been kind of chipping away, like, come on, man, you should really be doing this. And so, yeah, it all sort of, we literally went to Tivoli a day or two after we hung out with you guys, and we called Dave from Tivoli, and like Amar like made, we like recreated the call or whatever for Yes Theory, but the real thing was in Tivoli and, the old amusement park in Copenhagen. And we called Dave, we're like, are you up for doing this? And, I didn't know what, he's obviously has a million considerations, and it was bizarrely, it was bizarrely like, he was like, let's just go for it. Yeah, why not? And I think he had been a fan of Yes Theory prior, and obviously, a friend of mine. And so, ride or die friend for letting us do that. And I hope we did his story justice.
Yeah, he really seemed happy about Yes Theory and all the concepts about yes theory, and I think that was part of the reason why he went through with you guys instead of like doing something else probably.
Yeah, I think he had been really frustrated at the lack of mainstream media pickup around the story, and there have been, I think this is public information, but like there were attempts to get it in Washington Post. I mean, it's weird, right, that Leslie Kean broke the story. She's a New York Times reporter, and it wasn't in the New York Times. And so I think he at some point is like, this is ridiculous. Like I should, and I can get more distribution from kind of alternative media sources that'll go deeper and be more substantive anyways. And so, yeah, I'm super grateful to him for seeing that. And yeah, I think it turned out, pretty good. And it's weird. I mean, a part of me thinks it should, more people in like the mainstream should understand it, but and it's sort of a little frustrated around that. And then at the same time, I'm overwhelmed at how many people saw it and how good I think it turned out. So
yeah, it really turned out good. It was really, really good.
Thank you.
And maybe we can get into the process about making the documentary. I would call it more like a mini documentary rather than an interview. Maybe I don't know what your consideration was in regards to naming.
Yeah, the goal was to make it like a like our normal thing, like an interview with some kind of B-roll embellishment or whatever. And then it turned into a documentary. It basically was like a documentary with super low budget documentary, which it's kind of inspiring because it's like, I don't, we spent like probably a 50th or 100th of what a Netflix documentary would spend, and then we spent probably a 20th of the time. And it was just me, and it was a super ragtag team, me and an editor, and I was driving to his house in Pasadena, just trying to like get the final touches done, and we were going so hard on it. And it was inspiring. It was like, okay, maybe we can do this again for other topics. And the pitch for future guests can be like, we'll make you a free documentary on your subject. And as long as it's something that we're ideologically, we support in terms of the ideas, I think that's a pretty decent pitch for a random person. Like, hey, we'll make you a pretty good documentary. It's not going to be Netflix, but it's going to reach a lot of people. We'll do it quickly.
Yeah, it's a really interesting format to do it in that way. But I think there was a lot of people who was very curious about who this Jesse Michels were at that time, and I know that you have been like introduced as the YouTuber, just simply as the YouTuber, and I think actually I find it a bit regrettable in many ways that you only that people only refer to you as a YouTuber. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but considering that you actually have a quite impressive career at a quite young age, it seems somewhat limiting. So maybe you could start off by telling a bit about who Jesse is beyond YouTube.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I find it funny on the one hand, but I like it too because I have a chip on my shoulder, and I should be compared to other YouTubers, and I do think it's important to like for your identity to not. I think there was a part early on when I started YouTube where I was like, I have so many other irons in the fire that if I lose with the YouTube, it's fine. And like, I really want to eliminate that mindset. And so I think it's important to like identify with, okay, this is it. Look, I'm doing media. But having said that, I don't know where to start, but I grew up in LA, kind of, garden variety, upper middle class upbringing up here, and was always really interested in kind of media. And so that's kind of the through line to what I'm doing now. And politics. And so I went to school in New York at Columbia, and I studied history. I was very checked out of school, so I studied history because it was the least amount of credits, so I could like take the as many other weird classes that I felt like taking and kind of explore opportunities in the city of New York. And while doing that, I interned for a guy named Charlie Rose, who has since actually been Me Too'd. So I think the history has not looked kindly upon Charlie Rose, but in his time, he was like, a Larry King kind of analog, but maybe even more serious in the people. He interviewed every head of state and, relevant head of state, big head of state and often their cabinet members and on down as far as a lot of really important thought leaders and influential people would come on that show. And I just cold emailed them to get the thing, and I was like 19 years old, and I even remember in my cold email I was like, if you were an alien trying to learn about human civilization, what would you do? You would strap yourself to a couch and just force yourself to watch every Charlie Rose interview, which I think is kind of true. You know, I watched all of the interviews, and you know, he was an amazing interviewer. So I think gave me a little bit of a taste for like, okay, like all these amazing thinkers and figures are coming in. How do you like do research on them and distill the research down to the most relevant points for this, you know, important person and Charlie who's going to interview them? And so that's kind of a through line of my career that's helped me a lot with the YouTube stuff, because now it's even more complex, the topics. But so I did that. I interned for The Daily Show with Jon Stewart as well, which is a really fun experience. And I think that was, and I've updated a little politically since then, but I think at the time he was this very important bulwark against neoconservatism. And I mean, we're still seeing a lot of, I think, American military industrial complex overreach. I think we're seeing kind of an overhang of that, but it was in full effect when he was, you know, doing his thing in kind of the early 2000s. So I interned for him too, and then I started kind of a news aggregator that I mean, I messed up a bunch of, you know, it was like a really cool concept. It was back when RSS readers were big, and you can get all your favorite content in one place, but I made a lot of mistakes and ultimately failed. And it's the, you know, kind of cliche to say I learned a lot, but it was also just a really painful, shitty experience in some ways. But that kind of gave me the bug for the media thing. Then I went on to work at, and it made me realize actually how interesting the tech world was at the time. And I would, you know, read Paul Graham blogs and was really interested in Y Combinator and stuff. And so I went out to Google and worked there for 4 years. And for 2 years, because I had a history degree, I worked on the business side doing kind of sales and marketing. And then for the last 2 years, I was in operations and the research and machine intelligence department, doing kind of a crazy job that's honestly kind of hard to, I won't even try to explain it, and I don't even know if I'm, maybe that, I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it or whatever. It was sort of a weird, that's adding unnecessary mystique, because it was a weird job. It wasn't very efficient, to be totally honest, and I didn't feel like I was making a lot of progress. So indescribable, and like this is too you know, amorphous sort of way, not in like a mystique interesting way. But and at the time I was sort of like, I don't know what I'm going to do next. And so I had a friend who was running talks at Google, which is like Google's TED Talks equivalent. And he was like, hey man, if you ever want to interview people for this, you know, I'll give you carte blanche, do your thing. And so I would just hit up a bunch of people and I'd interview them kind of per my, you know, the internship at, you know, Charlie Rose and Jon Stewart. I was always interested in doing that. And I interviewed a bunch of people who I had been a fan of prior to that. So, you know, I don't know, random people like this Hollywood producer named Brian Grazer, or this other, you know, manager named Scooter Braun, and a bunch of like interesting thinkers. And I remember those days just being so much fun, just interviewing the people. And one of the people who I hit up to come in, but he didn't end up making it, but we ended up actually meeting up, was Peter Thiel. And so, yeah, I got lunch with him. We hit it off, and that changed my life. I ended up working for him full time, and, you know, and doing investing was sort of the primary role of the job. And also kind of, we had a similar, you know, kind of speaker series, and I would, you know, help search for interesting ideas and thinkers, and you know, yeah, do some of the same stuff that I was doing at Google as well there. And he's always just been very kind of libertarian in his management style, and supportive. And eventually I wanted to kind of start my own show and media thing, and he's, you know, sort of supportive of that. And so that's how the show came about. And initially it was just like interview kind of high signal people that I knew, and some of which were kind of in the investing and tech world. And then I just noticed the UFO stuff started to really take off, and I'd always been deeply interested in that. Or it really started actually, you know, later than definitely you, Frederick, like maybe 2018-ish. But I started the show in like 2020, 2021. So, really.
And the name of the show?
Yeah,
just
American
for our
Alchemy.
listeners?
And sorry if this answer is way too long-winded to your question, but and then I started the show, and the crazy paranormal UFO stuff started to take off, and I'm really interested in that, not just because it's like weird and out there, but because I'm interested in the nature of reality. Like, what is this like soup that we're like swimming in? Like that's really interesting. Like, what is life? Like, who are we? You know, what are we doing here? And so I just started to kind of lean into that and lean into kind of the more out there stuff I was curious about, and yeah, now we're here, I guess.
So a good mix between media, tech, and investing, and then you came about like mysticism and esoteric knowledge and things like that. What was there any particular reason why you chose to start a YouTube channel, just like fixated on those kind of topics? And you've also had like some really prominent guests on your show, like Jacques Vallée and Avi Loeb, Gary Noland, Eric Weinstein, Hal Puthoff, and now David Grusch. And when I came about your YouTube channel a couple of years ago, I think I came about it by chance, and I was actually quite surprised that the number of views wasn't that many, but you still like had some of the biggest names within this topic on. Do you know why you succeeded on getting them on?
Oh, and getting them on? Yeah, well, the world of UFOs wasn't big when I was initially interested. And you know this, Frederick, because you've met a lot of these people yourself.
Oh,
and
yes.
So, like, that's why, like, it's funny, like, increasingly, people, the number one question is, like, how do you know all these people or whatever? And it's like, I just reached out and showed, like, some interest in there, and, like, a level of interest that was a little deeper than the average person. And, like, they were really receptive back in the day, and then you form a genuine relationship with them, and so that was kind of how it, and then it snowballs, because you do somebody's ideas justice in a video format, especially when the ideas are really complex and they don't always get, like, Jacques Vallée's been on Joe Rogan, and if you listen to that 3 or 4 hour interview, and Rogan's an amazing interviewer. So this is not at all a knock against him. He's probably not that intimately familiar with Jacques' ideas or has like read many of his books, which is fine and understandable. But I felt like maybe I could go a little bit deeper, do his ideas a little more justice in like kind of a mid-form, easy to digest, comprehensible way with like B-roll and kind of more explanatory and monologue interludes, and kind of speed it up for the average viewer. And if you do that you're doing a service to Jacques when you do that. And then the next incremental person, Hal Puthoff, whoever, again with obscure ideas, is going to see that, and it's like, hey, I'm going to do that for you, and you're sort of doing these people a service, and I think they're more likely to say yes, and it sort of snowballs, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure it does. And now we are at Jacques Vallée. I've heard some skeptics discuss whether it was wise for David Grusch credibility to choose, and I quote here, a YouTuber heavily inspired by Jacques Vallée as his mouthpiece. And when I hear like such comments, I think maybe people underestimate the complexity of the phenomenon's origin. So what are your thoughts on this? And could you maybe explain a bit about your own perspective on why you believe that there are many like parapsychological threats to the UFO phenomenon?
Yeah, I mean, there clearly are parapsychological threats to the UFO phenomenon. And if you just look in a very scientific way at the observable, like at like the incidents themselves, usually the communication, if it's Close Encounters of the Third Kind, usually the communication is telepathic. And then if it's of the first kind and it's crafts, at least what we've heard is these crafts might not have control panels, and so there might be some sort of, interface there. And so, and then you just look at the people who are the deepest on the UFO thing, and there's an overlap with parapsychology, like very clear. Like Hal Puthoff created Stargate, which is, the American, CIA psychic spy program. Jacques Vallée also super into parapsychology. Now you could just try to discredit these people and say, okay, yeah, take a basket of all the crazy things, UFOs, parapsychology, Bigfoot, whatever. And so of course they're going to be correlated and go together, or there's clearly a connection there. But I guess to answer the, kind of the comment of like, why would Grusch go with somebody? It's a little ironic because I think the actual piece, I cut most of the parapsychology. So I didn't even talk about parapsychology because I thought it would be too much of a mind fuck for the average person. I thought it would kind of be going a little too far. So like, I felt like I had to rein it in actually. And I have all these weird hypotheses as to the connection between remote viewing and time travel and weird stuff. And I felt like, it was like, okay, let's actually just try to rein it in and just prove that this is real. And then maybe do a part, the second half of it, we can demarcate as speculation as to what the phenomena is, but really have a kind of a grounded conversation and make it about the observables and not require the person to believe in kind of a mind over matter effect, or anything outside of conventional physics for them to start to realize that there's something real here, which I think is but my earnest goal, because I fully believe there's something real here and it's so important. And so, I want people to understand that and not overload them with too many crazy things.
But I've also been quite curious about what you actually wanted to achieve regarding the documentary, the piece with David Grusch and his claims, because just why do you think that his story is important? Because I think I heard you say that you find it remarkable when people in the UFO community just like flat out believe David Grusch claims without having seen the craft or the being themselves. But you seem to be quite confident there's at least something being kept secret here. So what are your thoughts on that matter?
Pretty confident. I'm confident enough to make the video. And I'm confident because of him and because I trust him, but also because of the remarkable conservation of his story, how well it fits with open source stuff that I've investigated. And so I find it interesting when people are like, they've tried to semantically poke at like something they think he's been wrong on or whatever. And then that somehow flips their entire worldview to like, we don't believe anymore. And it's like, but there's so much open source stuff. So like, you're really being lazy. In fact, you're trusting the Intel community more than I am. Like, yes, I do trust the guy and I have a friendly relationship with him, but I also have like a ton of open source information where if, something were to come out that were to discredit him, it wouldn't break my belief in the underlying phenomena. It would be an update in my belief and I'd continue investigating. But I don't think he and Robert Hastings are meeting in some back room, where it's like Robert Hastings meeting over 150 U.S. military personnel who are, on the PRP program that have to report if they're taking ibuprofen, and like the most humble and, not histrionic, not attention-seeking people. I don't think they're coordinating, and I don't think he's coordinating with Jacques Vallée, who has really talked about or George Knapp, who's really focused on the DOE atomic secrecy angle. And so you really have to like, if the second you kind of you're putting pieces of the puzzle together that are coming from totally disparate places like that, it's just So of course you have to think in probability. If you don't see a thing yourself, I would urge everybody to have, healthy skepticism towards everything they hear in the media and towards everybody that makes a claim. But if you do deep research, I think you'll shake out to how I've shaken out, which is there's clearly something here, and his claims are very credible.
Today I saw the Weaponized podcast with Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, and they interviewed James Lukatsky and Colm Kelleher, and they also talked about disinformation agents and counterintelligence, and that there are typically these counterintelligence officers on all of these programs, and they put out like bogus information and make false documents and false documents. But then again, you could say that David Grusch is actually naming people, and he's naming like locations. So even if there are some of the information that has been fed to David Grusch, then he can still name these people.
Exactly.
And now the skiff has been granted just quite recently.
That's the way I see it. It's like if this is going to get corroborated or falsified very quickly, and so let's see what happens. But it's bringing 40 people to the inspector general that's not a joke. People have handled the material firsthand and have, are pretty deep on we're part of these programs. And so if they weren't, we're going to find out quickly. And I agree with what you're saying.
I also think that you mapped out the mechanisms of the possible secrecy or cover up very good in the piece in regards to the Atomic Energy Act and things like that. I actually just went to watch Oppenheimer the other day, and the only thing that I could think about throughout watching the Oppenheimer was the things that David Grusch alleged about the Atomic Energy Act and things like that. So I completely agree that if you dive in deep enough in the open source literature and information, you can probably find things that correlates with what we are seeing now and Grush's claims.
Yeah, there's so much. It's like you have the Roswell story, the famous Roswell story, where the materials are taken to Wright-Patt Air Force Base. Wright-Patt becomes an anti-gravity research center under a guy named Josh Goldberg. You have the atomic secrecy stuff, where Dave's saying that he thinks he found that, Robert Sarbacher set this stuff up. Robert Sarbacher was dealing with Townsend Brown, who's building a gravitator that looks like a UFO. He's forming NICAP, which is, the National Institute or the National something Committee on Aerial Phenomena, which is the first UFO civilian, UFO study program at the time with Donald Kehoe. And there's just so much conservation in these stories. You have, Lockheed at the time, the Martin Corporation in 56 has RIAS, which is an anti-gravity research outfit. You have so much. You have Lewis Whitten even saying on record in an American Institute of Physics interview that, there's some guy who thinks that bismuth, named Townsend, who thinks that bismuth has anti-gravity properties. Who's a guy named Townsend? It's probably Townsend Brown. And Gary Nolan has in his lab, he has magnesium bismuth. And so there's just so much where very disparate places. I mean, like, you could come up with some tale of, like, people coming, studying the open source information and trying to find, like, the best woven together narrative that they could then try to add to with this stuff. But I just don't see it. I think this stuff is real. And then really it's like you have all these average civilians who are coming out and saying things, and like it's your right not to trust the government. I think the government's not a monolith, and I tend to be skeptical of a lot of aspects of the government, but I think there are some elements that are truthful, and then it's just the average civilian thing is, I think, a really important component as well.
I can't help to think that I have former been an employee in a law firm where we applied artificial intelligence to map out, like, when a company have gone bankrupt or something like that, to see whether there have been any criminal activity and whatsoever, like cluster the data and find certain patterns and things like that. And maybe in the future we can use some kind of artificial intelligence to find some patterns within all this open source data. That could be very interesting.
Could be super interesting, yeah. I think you'd need to create a really big kind of database first. You need to compile all this stuff. But
the OSAP database.
The OSAP database. I tend to be skeptical of AI as a solution to stuff like this, just because you have to draw patterns from all these completely disparate domains, and it's hard to turn it into a structured data set. And then if you have a structured data set, I think of AI as being able to do what humans can do, but kind of harder, better, faster, stronger. Kind of like the Daft Punk song. But they often, AI can't do something stepwise better. Like, if humans can't do it at low sample size, I have trouble believing that the AI is going to somehow spit out the answer at high sample size. Usually it's supervised learning, and you're like, labeling the data correctly, and then, the the AI can do a good job at scale, and obviously there are other, token prediction models or whatever. But like, I'm skeptical of that, of the AI. I think we outsource too much to that sometimes.
But I really found your segment about Townsend Brown really fascinating. What a fascinating character
he's my
he
favorite character. Yeah.
And especially that you brought it up to the connection to Tim Burchett during the hearing. That was quite funny. But there must be some fascinating implications, because if Townsend Brown really did indeed contribute to the development of these extremely classified technologies, isn't there a possibility that what we are seeing are just classified American projects?
Yeah, I think it's a possibility, but I think it's really unlikely. And the reason that I think it's unlikely, and maybe there's also some intentional conflating going on at some level for certain things that are classified projects, for all I know. But I think the actual underlying crashed craft thing is likely correct as well. And the reason is Townsend Brown in his private life would talk constantly about biblical UFOs. And he would talk to his daughter all the time about, there's even a quote in the documentary where it's like, a fish doesn't know about the boats, overhead or whatever. They don't see the hulls. They don't know what's going on. We sweetie are the fish. And so there's just something so mystical about his overall orientation. And so, like the NICAP, the creation of NICAP, is that crowdsourcing intelligence on some deep black terrestrial tech, or is that just genuine interest in UFOs? I don't know. It's hard to say. There's a book called UFO Crash by a guy named William Steinman that claims that Townsend Brown was on the Aztec crash in March of 1948. He was on the cleanup crew with Oppenheimer and a bunch of other people. That would be pretty insane if we could somehow corroborate that. But there's just so much between Roswell, Aztec, which is a little bit of information about a couple of other crashes. I think there's been people detracting, Trinity and Jacques Vallée, but I actually think he did a pretty good job of research there. There are just so many of these crashes that I tend to think, that's my base case.
Virginia and Brazil,
of course, Virginia and Brazil, where people, encountered actual, beings. And so I think there's just so much of that. But I also, I'm open to all sort of possibilities, and I think maybe we've made a decent amount of progress in terms of reverse engineering this stuff, and that's just my hunch. But and it's based on go for it.
When you're talking about progress on these programs, I just recently listened to Jay from Project Unity. You were also on that podcast quite recently, and there is this point about these crash retrieval programs, and Ross Coulthard and Nick Cook, they were also on this on Jay's program, and they talked about this fear in these programs, and this might be hampering or making it impossible to progress in these programs, because when people are afraid and there's this lot of fear going on in a work environment, then it kind of blocks this, creates a flow, and they talked about these flow states. So you need to kind of be in a good vibe or in a good mood, or you have to have openness in order to make progress scientifically. And this is normally how science, it works, and like in the open civilian environment. I know that this is what they often talk about in the place where I work at the Niels Bohr Institute, that there's openness and talking to each other and discussing things. This is what makes science work. And so I think you also mentioned something about this refreshing the talent pool. Do you have any? Maybe this is why
clearly some element of the program, it could be faction, could be just the defectors, the 40 defectors or whatever. They, I think, are doing this out of what they think is patriotic duty. And it's clear that, I think Dave's example is like, our world's leading expert on quantum chromodynamics who might smoke weed or whatever, now, wouldn't have access to the program because they don't even know that this stuff exists. They think it's like the story, it's relegated to like total sci-fi. And they have no idea that it's real. And so like if you're a STEM student and you're moving up in, our kind of conventional physics, you're kind of being led like sheep to slaughter to like this crazy publish or perish. You're writing a bunch of papers that go into a black hole and you probably have like the wrong framework or whatever. And so I'm sure if you're inside the program and you see that, you want people to at least understand the ontological truth that this is true and real, and we have programs working on this. And then there are trade secrets in terms of how you do the work on it, just like nuclear stuff. There are secrets around how you create a nuclear bomb, which there should be. But the idea that we have a nuclear program is not secret. And so I'm sure that this is partially happening. I mean, obviously Dave is an obsessive truth seeker and digger, and he's autistic, and you can see his kind of like laser guided missile orientation towards truth. But I also think there had to be defections clearly for this story to be coming out, and so I do think that is an important narrative, and I was trying to get at that in my questioning, and yeah.
Do you think, because we heard a lot about that, it's called like the program, but do you think there's like multiple programs within DoD and DOE? Because I think it's really fascinating that David Grusch and a lot of other people has said that these gatekeepers of the secret largely work for private companies, and all of these facilities under the National Nuclear Security Administrations are also operated by private contractors, right. Including places like Area 51 and Los Alamos, and they are also protecting the nuclear weapons. And if all of this like falls under the DOE and not DOD, there's probably a possibility that's the reason why David Grusch has been denied access when he says, when I approach, I got the door slammed in my face.
Yeah, and I think the key thing you just said is a private contractor thing. I think if something's in the private sector, then you own you own this material or whatever. Like, I think I have to look this up, but I think even under current like meteorite law, like you might even like have like a right to it, and then there's no like FOIA process. There's no like typical government transparency requirements, and so yeah, I think a lot of these things are just like kind of perennially locked up in these private corporations, and the corporations probably don't know what to do with it. To the extent that they've kind of hidden the nature of reality or whatever, I think, it's pretty messed up. And then on the other hand, it's like, I don't quite know what to do. Like to me, my main interest is kind of nature of reality, and how do we get this at least as broadly understood as possible, where we can stop this kind of larger science stagnation in society. And if this is kind of a clear example that our framework is entirely wrong, then like that's the biggest tragedy to me. And so if we can, crack down on anybody who's done anything horribly unethical, but like maybe some forgiveness is necessary to like have this stuff come out, because it's I don't know how we get it out otherwise. I really hope that, the Schumer amendment, which says that, if any of this stuff is going on, it has to be handed over to the Congress, actually holds weight. But if it doesn't, to me, the most important thing is that broader society understands the truth.
Sure. Do you think that about apparently, allegedly, there are companies who have access to this technology, but do you think there are other companies out there that kind of has smelled money and now they want in, and they're kind of lobbying the politicians in Washington? This is also going on behind the scenes, that many companies just look at other companies. Why did they get the tech and we didn't get the tech?
I think this subject is still pretty fringe, and so I don't know the answer to that question, but like maybe people smell opportunity. People have, because of my investing background, people have been like, like, do you just want to reverse engineer this or get your hands on material or whatever? And my answer is always like, of course I would love to deal with the material, and if there's some way to scale this up in a safe open way or whatever, yeah, of course I'd be interested in that. And I'm just really curious, but I'm mainly driven by curiosity. I think there's something sacrilegious or heretical about, my interest is not to monetize. There's real opportunity cost in what I'm doing on the investing side. And I could have done some way more linear, conventional thing with like, just try to raise a bigger fund and, bigger fund or whatever. And I'm still not convinced that from a pure profit perspective, like that wouldn't be a more advisable, direction for my life. But I'm just it's like you have one life to live, and I'm obsessed with the nature of reality, and I need to sort of figure it out.
Me too. That's also my primary interest, but I'm just also trying to understand the process in Washington, and this might be a part of it. I mean, I'm just suspecting that, because I know that it's going to be a huge business opportunity connected with these technologies. I mean, it's
the companies with
so
the
much
technology
money.
It's like, let's give the proverbial case where I have no idea what they have, but people mention Lockheed Martin a lot, right? And they have this like bloated cost plus model, and like all the primes, if the primes are the prime suspects here, they have slow development cycles. It's really expensive, and so that's for like hypersonics and for F-22s and stuff. So like if it takes you that long for for that like prosaic technology, and you're not attracting our youngest, best, and brightest, like you're probably not making as much progress as you should be on this other kind of more esoteric stuff. So I agree with you. And then, I don't know which other companies might be candidates.
But I think that Russ Coulthard, and actually one of our listeners also alluded to this in a question that they sent us. But Russ Coulthard here, he's also been saying that some Silicon Valley companies would love to get their hands on some UAP technology, and I know, and you probably know as well, that many people have been speculating in Peter Thiel's role in this, because he's been quite involved in UFO research in many ways.
Well,
I believe.
Can I set the record straight? Not at all. Like he's not involved at all in UFO research.
Not at all?
Really not at all. Like he's interested in the frontiers of knowledge, and has had conversations about the topic, but he's not. To the people who think it's like he's like masterminding this, or like he wants me. I'm like his UFO guy. Like that could not be farther from the truth. And
that's nice to get to set the record straight. Because I know a lot of people have been speculating about his participation in the research.
Yeah, but I think it's just because I'm out there interviewing UFO people or whatever. But no, he's not at all formally involved in any sort of research.
That's good. Cool. All right, Jesse, I also want to go take a step back, because when we were in Copenhagen, we also discussed your views on Bob Lazar, and you suggested that he might have been a part of MK Ultra. And you also hint that in the documentary when you mentioned Bob Lazar once drank a mysterious liquid. So just for our listeners, what was MK Ultra, and why might Bob Lazar be relevant in that context?
I have no idea if he was, but MK Ultra I think it was started as Operation Bluebird and then Artichoke, or maybe I'm mixing those up, but those two, and then MK Ultra, and it was after some prisoners had gotten back POWs had gotten back from the Korean War. You had this program start, and this was in the days of Sidney Gottlieb, who was the head of the technical staff services for the CIA, and he was doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And it was basically the experimentation of with LSD and sodium pentothal to insert and memories, false memories and narratives, and kind of, people's personalities become malleable when they're, on LSD. And there was this weird, Operation Midnight Climax in the Haight-Ashbury, where they'd take a bunch of hippies and they'd sort of drug them up, and it's really gnarly, kind of crazy stuff. And actually a guy named Jolly West, who was the head of the UCLA psychiatry department, it was friends with all these celebrities out in LA, and like prominent guy nobody would have suspected, but now due to a guy named Tom O'Neill's book called Chaos, we now know probably ran MK Ultra. And anyways, it's a crazy rabbit hole, and unclear how much progress they made or if they, just botched most of their attempts. But that's what that is. And the only reason I don't know if Bob Lazar was, I have no idea, but he pattern matches a little to somebody who would be an MK Ultra patient. Like, in that book I mentioned by Tom O'Neill called Chaos, they sort of like people who are like loners, and, they have somewhat of a criminal record. So you have kind of, you have compromat on them. So you kind of have leverage over them. And it's sort of this catch and release dynamic where, they go to jail, you scramble their brain or whatever, and then you let them out. And then, so anyway, so Bob Lazar is definitely like a kind of misanthropic character who has an interesting track record with the law. And then I think the craft that he describes is like a 1-to-1 match to, I'm blanking on the movie, but I think it might be Flight of the Navigator, which was an 80s movie. It was a Disney movie. And so, that's sort of interesting.
This one?
What? Let me see. Do you have
this one? Can you see it?
Sort of. The picture behind you?
Yes, that's the Bob Lazar drawing.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Yeah, we'll only see half of it.
It's a sport
but
model.
I can't see all of it. But
a quarter of it.
Yeah, so and then that's how I think it sort of works, is like you maybe you like Charles Manson, for example, like he would carry Stranger in a Strange Land around with him even though he was illiterate. So, and that became the narrative of his life. He named his son Don Valentine, and his parole officer, who I think specialized in LSD and amphetamine stuff, I think his name was Roger Stone. He called him Jubal, which was the protector from Stranger in a Strange Land. So the book becomes the narrative for your life. And so it's like maybe there was some funkiness with Bob Lazar where he was shown media or something. And I have no idea. It's like crazy speculation. And he gave this,
Sure.
He told that to Jacques Vallée, who wrote that in his book. So, and I think it was like Messengers of Deception. I have no idea. And then there's a John Lear connection, which is a little weird, but.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's a bit of a rabbit hole to go into, as you say.
Yeah.
But Jesse, I know you are also very fascinated, as you also say, about the nature of reality and things like that. And in the documentary, you also mentioned that David Grusch has endured your wild speculations about the UFO phenomenon over the phone. So what are your own speculations about the origin of the UFO phenomenon?
I have no idea, but I think that if we're to put on our crazy kooky hats and just, I'm not saying, I don't fully stand by everything I'm about to say. This is speculation, I think that we might be part of some larger cosmic war, and your local energy statement and treatment of your surrounding environment is of vital importance. And it's almost of more importance than whatever nominally you think you're doing in your life. So the metrics by which we've lived in the past of, I did this prestigious thing and, I have the XYZ title or whatever, I think that's going to matter less. And I think your just energy as a person, your treatment of your body and your mind and the people around you is going to be increasingly emphasized and important. And, yeah, I mean, broadly speaking, it's like, Robert Monroe, he had this idea that like entities might be mining loosh or negative energy. And so I think there might be some faction that wants to, mine our attention. Like when you're on your phone, when you're scrolling through bullshit and your mind is just hooked up to the Borg of international geopolitical news, and you're on Twitter and you're spewing negative stuff. Where is your consciousness? Like what's going on with that? And then on the flip side, yeah.
Where's your flow state?
And so I guess broadly where's your flow state? And so I think it's like we're kind of antennas or something, or pawns in this thing. And you have one side that's really trying to like extract and mine, and it's a little more active and interfere. There's more active interference. Like if you read like C.S. Lewis's The Screw Tape Letters, like it would be these sort of, demonic characters like, Wormwood, and Screw Tape, that are like, they're trying to like actively mess with you. And then on the other side, you have maybe more angelic beings that are less, they don't interfere. You have to fight your way to them. It's a sort of a two-way connection, like Michelangelo's, like the Sistine Chapel, where it's like you reach out, they reach out. It's a two-way connection. And I think that's a beautiful thing too. But I think broadly speaking, that would be the factions. And then, yeah, I mean, look, I don't know. I think a lot of these, Greys and reptilians and this and that, Nordics and blah, 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 these feel like somewhat incidental overlays or something, or like, forms of, like it's like we're talking about specific shades these things take based on our kind of lower, less Platonic reality. And so it's kind of we have these like analytical overlays and agreements that these things look like, certain things, but they are fundamentally elusive and hard to understand. And I think they use intermittent reinforcement a la Jacques Vallée and absurdity. Absurdity makes you obsessed. Certainty, the answer, you can walk away. And so there's something about that is actually a more powerful tool, kind of ephemeral, elusive absurdness. And I think they use tactics like that, sort of, very...
It tricks the phenomenon as well.
So that, I mean, I don't know where that gets us.
And I think even...
my crazy worldview.
Yeah, but I think I can't help to think about, surely there seems to be somewhat of a connection to our consciousness, of course, but I can't help to think there's also a huge connection to what people are reporting with the use of psychedelics. And I don't know whether you're familiar with this quote from Terence McKenna, but he once expressed that we are maybe in some kind of symbiotic relationship with an intelligence that disguises itself as aliens, so we aren't scared of what the intelligence really is. And I know John Keel has actually said something similar, so that's just so interesting.
I agree with that. Even on a more biological, prosaic level, every body has a mycobiome along with the microbiome, and then we know it's passé to say that there's a mind-gut connection. And then mushroom spores travel through space, and so you have this thing that might have come from, or we hypothesized that they travel through space. We found them on the International Space Station. We don't know if they came from Earth or if they came from elsewhere, but they're extremophiles and they can withstand high amounts of radiation. So let's just say that they do travel through space. I don't know that, but speculating, they travel through space. You have this thing that maybe traveled from light years away that's like inside of you, that definitely through the vagus nerve and other sort of means has some implicit effect on your personality and your overall orientation. And I know Terence McKenna was, super into this. In fact, he did a mushroom trip, a really intense one, where he said, I think it's called The Song of the Mushroom or something. He says the mushroom laid bare to him the plans for a hyper light drive ship. And the whole idea of a mushroom, I mean, if you were trying to build a Kardashev 4 scale civilization, would you create this like hominid thing that looks like a foreign invader, or would you subtly merge with a higher creature, affect their thinking in slight ways, kind of unlock certain knowledge for them, almost like a zip drive of lost consciousness, and then try to help them create the technology to then, become interplanetary or intergalactic? I think the more resilient Kardashev 4 scale civilization is going to be that. It's not going to be this meat flesh thing that like shows up at your doorstep, like, and then you can just shoot it or whatever, So I think there's something very interesting about that. I think there's something very interesting about human beings as differentiated from other animals that I think is profoundly understudied and we forgot about when we accepted Darwin as dogma. As soon as we thought that, we come from apes, we just think we're this kind of primitive to progress phylogenetic upward trend and we're the culmination of it. As soon as you start to think that, I think you lose what's very unique and special and weird about the human mind and human beings.
Yeah.
And I do think that's very underexplored. And so, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. The John Keel and McKenna might have better answers, and they might be just much deeper on this. But I agree with the general sentiment.
Yeah. Yeah, it probably also because we've also heard that there probably are many good reasons for the secrecy surrounding all of the nature about the phenomenon, and there may be some dark and eerie aspects to it. What do you think that maybe is that's the same connection?
Yeah, and I urge people to who are into this subject, you get fatigued and you get overwhelmed and you can go into dark places, and I think when you do that, just focus, it's so easy to get obsessed with this stuff and think it's the only thing that matters and that reality doesn't matter. And I think reality is set up the way it is for a reason. And maybe you just need to fix some of the things in your local life, and then maybe the answers will actually get downloaded in a healthier way. I mean, I think a lot of people, myself included, I think it's most people have shards of really unintegrated information, and then often they'll have some personal breakthrough where they feel like they're on the right path, and they're doing this beautiful thing they're supposed to be doing, and then they experience a bunch of synchronicities and serendipity, and then ironically, I think the proper semantic information presents itself. So to anybody who's in this crazy rabbit hole search or whatever, I would just, I think 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and you don't have to rush the thing, and to really delineate between, am I forcing it here, or does this feel natural and right and good energy? And so I think that's really important in this topic specifically, because stuff can get, things can get weird.
I also agree. I think that the answer to what can be dark and eerie probably is not what we traditionally perceive as dark and eerie, but maybe the answer is just that maybe the consciousness and the aspects of reality is probably much more weird than we perceive.
Yeah, and you never know. I believe in God, and I think God is playing 4D chess at a level that it's you never know what's good and what's bad, and you can feel good and it can be bad, and then you can feel really bad, and that can be your, the best thing that's ever happened to you. And I think often you're tested, but it's for good reason, and it's for your own evolution. And I think if there's a track above and there's a track below, I think below it's I need to feel good and have good looks and money and whatever, and I think the track above is just pure let's just evolve as much as possible. And often the hardest moments in life are you're growing the most. And I just think that's sort of very profoundly important.
I completely agree. But Jesse, we don't want to take too much of the time. I don't know how much time you have left.
I have, you want to do I don't know, if we would should be there in 50. I have 5 minutes, if that's okay. Is that all right?
5 minutes.
Okay. I was
okay.
trying to do 15, then I realized
have a question.
I had a meeting right after this. My bad.
Okay.
We could do it again too.
There's a question that I really would like to ask. Where do you think that the mainstream science will move in the coming years? You talked about this Kuhnian shift, paradigm shift. Do you think that there's some other epistemological
I do.
coming,
I have no idea. The specifics matter most, and I'd be a billionaire if if I knew the specifics. And so I want to be humble, and that looks like I think, just in a very kind of prosaic way, Kuhn talked about current existing paradigms break. There's kind of a law of declining marginal returns. So it's you think about it, you're writing your PhD on, as a biologist on, some super specific thing about mitochondria, or in physics, it's we're figuring out we're crossing the, dotting the I and crossing the T on string theory. And we're putting the very final touch, or if you're doing an English PhD or whatever, it's the use of the semicolon in Victorian era English. It's you're doing this everything's been figured out, and you have to add this incrementally new thing, and it's kind of worthless. And I think that's happening in a lot of scientific fields. I'd actually say biology is probably like one of the more interesting fields right now. But I think physics, it's definitely happening. And if you could think of physics, at least in our understanding of reality, as the base layer. And so given that, I do think we're going to have to see a paradigm shift, or we see a stop. You know, it's like the end of everything. And like, I don't believe that. I don't think we're just going to be the end. That would be ahistorical, right? And so, and I don't think we necessarily have to go back into the dark ages. Like, I think we can cross the chasm into something new and exciting. And I think the epistemological paradigm shift has something to do with the observed breakdown and kind of cognition by identification with things instead of you know, there being sort of a distance, and maybe kind of a Rudolf Steiner kind of anthroposophical model where spiritual phenomena is not systematically discarded. It's actually tended to and treated kind of more scientifically. And then like there are all these ways in which that could go, and it could go in a really light, amazing direction and kind of be very libertarian, and then it could be very dark as well. And I just have no, I mean, I'd love to be a part of it, and I'd love to be a part of the positive thing, and to fund kind of, you know, research in that direction, and to spend a lot of, you know, the rest of my life focused on that.
Because I already see that there's some interesting things going on at this University of Virginia, this Division of Perceptual Studies, and there's a very famous book called Irreducible Mind that Ibn Alexander, who had a near-death experience, he always refers to this book. I don't know if you know this, but I mean, this is kind of this merging of more traditional science and spirituality, and I think that the UFO phenomenon is also kind of in between these two worlds. I mean, I think James Lakatsky and Colm Kelleher on this episode quite recently, just yesterday, talked about that this. If you have to study the UFO phenomenon, you have to study the nuts and bolts, but you also have to study like the more elusive and the more paranormal stuff. You have to go on different levels, on several levels, in order to understand this phenomenon. I think this has all been intriguing to me, and what's been intriguing to me about the UFO phenomenon is that it could kind of be the bridge between the kind of the reductionism and then the more new, more holistic science.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's just a sliver. It's a sliver of a larger worldview that's like super exciting, and like black body radiation created the quantum revolution, or you know, the orbit of Mercury wasn't explained in the Newtonian paradigm, but it was in relativistic one. I think anomalies are really important to study and bring forth a new understanding. And so the UFOs in some sense are a distraction. It's like the much larger thing that the UFOs represent that I think is super exciting. And yeah, I'm excited because I think we live in the age of sort of disenchantment, you know, to quote, I think it's Max Weber. And we systematically discard our own epistemology in favor of this kind of Cartesian dualist consensus. And so yeah, I think hopefully we can end that.
But maybe the re-enchantment is going on right now.
Yeah.
I see what's happening now. It's kind of a re-enchantment, isn't it?
And I think it happens often when the global macro, you see a downturn, and I think we're seeing that right now. So it's an interesting time. I think it'll be like the 2020s might be like the 1920s. You know, it's going to be like shit's going south, but then a lot of really interesting ideas are going to come down too. And yeah, I'm excited. And I'm also nervous about the geopolitical stuff. I mean, it's pretty gnarly.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
me too. Yeah, that's quite fucked up what's going on at the moment. But yeah, but Jesse, I don't want to. We don't want to take too much of your time. We don't want you to be late at your meeting. But we're so happy that you were willing to come on. It was a really interesting and fascinating discussion, as we also had in Copenhagen.
Martin, Frederick, I appreciate your guys' time, and yeah, this was awesome. And let's do it again. And sorry I was so shitty on the scheduling front. And
it doesn't matter
with your car.
Cool. And
yeah, you must have been so busy.
It was actually it was a bunch of things, taxes, and some investing stuff. It was lame. No, it wasn't UFOs. So yeah, exactly,
life.
just life.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Exactly.
come visit LA, and I'll let you know next time I'm out in Europe.
Oh, that would be nice.
Yeah, sure
Cool.
will, Jesse.
Thanks,
Thank you
guys.
so much, man.
Appreciate it.
Take care.
Later.
Take care, Jesse.
Thank you.
All right.
Have a
See
bye,
you, man.
guys.